was going to steal that from you, Meg.
Oh, did you want it?
No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much, Meg, for the kind introduction. Just like to reflect on, I think, Bob's opening presentation yesterday. He was talking about which hat we wear or which uniform we wear. So today, the uniform I'm wearing is with a volunteer with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, in particular the Commission on Protected Areas. I'm going to start us off with a short video which will highlight some of the key global issues that protected areas are facing at the moment. I do have a warning. The narrator speaks very fast, so I'm not sure if the translators will be able to keep up with the individual. And I think the narrator has a really, really deep either UK or Australian accent, so poor translators. No. So I'm going to give it a try if the technology will work for us.
So I think it's so.
Just this one?
Yeah, I was hoping.
Who's this?
Yeah,
Try it again.
try this. Yeah, try it now. Yeah, that other thing messed us up. But
Once upon a time, the world was clean and green and the plants and animals lived happily. That is a myth, but one we like. The myth had many names in different cultures. The Western world called it the Garden of Eden. Then along came humans who spread around the world, controlled fire and invented tools, weapons, agriculture and civilization. The world started to change quickly. Species started to disappear. With the Industrial Revolution, change really accelerated. Fossil fuels enabled us to transform the world. As nature disappeared, we still loved nature, we worshipped nature and even protected nature for rich people to hunt in. But nature continued to disappear. Cultures became global and human population rose to 7 billion. So we need to get serious about saving nature. We know we are a part of nature. What happens to nature happens to us. We love nature. It's the basis of our art and culture, but we have become disconnected from it. We know that well-managed protected areas work to save nature. A global study of marine protected areas found that effectively managed areas had more large fish. The modern protected area movement has a long and proud tradition. From early models of government-run protected areas, we have seen an expansion to a great diversity of types of protected areas managed by local communities, Indigenous people and private individuals. But this has not been enough to stop the decline in nature. We've been trying to set conservation goals for saving nature, although history has shown that we have mostly failed to meet these goals in practice. Our latest attempt at goals is something called the Convention on Biological Diversity. It has a set of 20 targets to save nature. Target 11 is all about a comprehensive system of protected areas that are in the right places, are connected, well managed and actually work to conserve nature. And yes, we want this new goal by the year 2020. This is the biggest target yet. It is the target. It is why we are here to make it happen. Protected areas are the best ways to protect nature and provide benefit to people. If we use protected areas well, we can stay in the web of life too. Target 11 is a great first step and we really need to make it happen. But it's only a first step. We need to get out of setting political targets and move to nature-based targets so we can have a really sustainable relationship between nature and people. At this gathering, there are people who know about protected areas. We are people who love nature, who have experience in saving nature, who know science and who know people. Let's be creative and set a new path for the world.
Wow. Now that is speed narrating. I mean, that is some serious speed talk there. Those of you who want to have a copy of it and you have a memory stick, I'll be more than happy to share that video with you, and maybe you can find a way to play it slower. So, when Meg called me last December to ask me to give a presentation on the promise of Sydney, or the results of the World Parks Congress, it was a great pleasure, actually, to try to make this connection of the work of the IUCN. Is this slideshow? Here we go. Great. The work of the maybe I'll just backtrack a bit. How many people here know what the IUCN is? Okay, just very briefly, the IUCN is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. It was established in 1948. It has approximately 1,200 members with representatives of government as well as non-governmental organizations. And this is quite unique. I think in 2016, for us to establish an organization like the IUCN will actually be impossible because governments would want to have their own thing and non-government organization would do their own thing. And in terms of decision-making within the IUCN, it's actually split. You need to have a majority vote from both the non-governmental organization part of the House as well as the government organization. So it's a very good forum to exchange science, exchange knowledge, and also develop global policy. And every 4 years, it hosts a World Conservation Congress, and every 10 years, it hosts a World Parks Congress. And within the IUCN, there's a commission called the World Commission on Protected Areas, in which the IRF is a member, a very active member. And the purpose of that commission is really to provide global leadership in terms of policy, best practices, and guidelines on protected areas issues. And today, I would like to talk a little bit about the World Parks Congress, which took place in Sydney, Australia in 2014, and some of the results coming out of that and the outcomes from those debates and discussions amongst the participants. The Australia, New South Wales, Parks Australia, New South Wales, as well as the IUCN, all three groups hosted this meeting in Sydney. It was very well attended by over 6,000 participants. And the theme of the Congress, and it's quite important, is to make the connection amongst the three elements of parks, people, and planet. And it's actually extremely useful to have the meeting in Sydney with the input of the Indigenous people. Certainly from a scientific perspective, we may view parks, people, and planet as very separate entities, whereas the Indigenous people in Australia and around the world, they really see this as intertwined. We call it parks, they call it homeland. And this is a very appropriate theme for the World Parks Congress. So the second aspect of the Congress, which is quite unique, we can focus on the various issues that are affecting protected areas, but the Congress itself made a decision to focus on inspiring solutions. What are some of the best practices that leaders around the world in local parks, regional parks, national parks, Indigenous parks are actually making a difference on these various issues that we're challenged by on a regular basis? So just very quickly, some statistics. Over 6,000 participants from 160 countries with over 300 workshop sessions and various pavilions. And it's really important at these forums that no single perspective really come forward. It is a forum for debate to get the best policies and best practices move forward. Because at the end of this, the Promise of Sydney, or the document that came out of the Congress, represents the blueprint for the next 10 years, because the next Parks Congress will not take place until then. So what is the Promise of Sydney? It's comprised of four major components: the vision, innovative approaches, solutions to some of our challenges, and also commitments from governments, civil society, as well as non-government organizations on how we can, in the moving forward, fulfill the vision. It's really a vision of what we want to see, in a sense that it's well recognized by all participants at the Congress, whether you're from government, non-governmental organizations, private sector, that we need a rebalancing of the relationship between ourselves and the ecosystems that we rely on, that we depend on for our survival. And that's clearly one of the messages coming out of Sydney, that the vision needs to be supporting the identity, the economies, and the well-being of civilization into the future. It recognizes that, it clearly recognizes that human existence depends on functioning ecosystems, and that nature is essential, vital, crucial, indispensable for our survival. Just backtrack. The Congress is divided into 8 streams, and I hope that everyone in the audience will be able to find their work aligned with some of these streams. The first one was reaching conservation goals. We all know that biodiversity decline, we have not been successful in halting the decline of biodiversity, and that continued to be moving in a downward trend significantly. How do we go about reaching these goals and employing new approaches and new strategies? Responding to climate change, I think this is the greatest environmental and economic issue that the world has to deal with at the moment. And there was a stream that discussed and debated how do we move forward on this from a protected areas perspective. Improving health and well-being, this is one of the streams that actually came out of Australia. Parks Victoria play a leadership role in moving health into the protected areas agenda. And now it's well recognized around the world that this is a role that protected areas can play in terms of improving the health and well-being of our citizens. Supporting human life, looking at how clean air, clean water, and the food that we require can, in fact, come from protected areas. Reconciling developmental challenges. I think we see that every day in our work in protected areas. How do we work with those who are making these developmental decisions and ensure that the work that we do in terms of conservation are also taken into consideration? Enhancing diversity and quality of governance. This is another major area. While here in North America, we have somewhat fairly predictable governance structure in our park services. There are either federal governments, provincial governments, or state governments, whereas elsewhere around the world, there are very different models where local communities, there are actually private protected areas, as well as indigenous conservation areas. And we're seeing some of those being recognized here in North America as well. So that particular stream explored these areas. Stream 8, this actually stemmed from the World Parks Congress in Durban, where Nelson Mandela spoke to all the delegates in Durban, in South Africa, and said, conservation of nature is being managed by white-haired men, and we need to reach out to the next generation. We need to reach out to the youth, develop the new leaders of tomorrow, empower them, and more significantly, start that intergeneration dialogue where veterans like us, we can pass on our best experiences and knowledge, and then for the youth to apply their innovation and new approaches to nature conservation, and see if they can do a better job than us. There are also cross-cutting themes that did not fit into the 8 that I mentioned in the earlier slide. One was on capacity development, particularly outside of North America. Capacity development and professionalization of the protected areas staff and our network is viewed as a very important path forward in terms of improving our ability to manage protected areas globally. Marine, as Meg mentioned, this is a critical area that as a global community, as a global protected areas community, we need to make substantive advances in the next few years. World Heritage, again, a cross-cutting theme for many of our protected areas. And then there's also a cross-cutting theme called a new social compact in terms of exploring new ways for decision-making. How do we engage the local communities, the youth, the landowners in a brand new decision-making process? My presentation is going to be broken down into 3 areas. I'm going to talk about parks, some of the decisions, elements that came out of, that can fall within the parks sphere, if you will, and then I'll go on to talk about the solutions for people and for planet. Due to the time available, I'm not going to go through the 150 recommendations, but really, because I'm going to be using up all of Harvey's time, I'm going to just select a few that may be very much applicable to our work. One of the most important reports that was tabled at the Congress was called the Protected Planet Report. And basically, this report is a scorecard of how well countries are doing in terms of, number one, establishing protected areas, both terrestrial and marine, around the world. And while it will show that some countries are playing a leadership role in terms of advancing their commitments, but we're way, way behind overall as a global protected areas community. For example, globally, we're probably somewhere between 12 and 15% of terrestrial ecosystems that have been protected. Protected meaning those areas actually have management plans. They are, the activities are managed and regulated, which is, as we have seen in terms of conserving biodiversity, is not enough. And even those 12%, as we all know, many of those are under attack. It's even worse in the marine environment. Approximately only 2% of oceans are actually protected. And we need to get way, way, way beyond that if we're to be successful in conserving the biodiversity of the marine ecosystems. Just to highlight the oceans a little bit more, at the Congress, all countries and all non-governmental organizations recognize this needs to be a priority for us in the next few years leading up to 2020. And in fact, within the Convention on Biological Diversity, there's actually a commitment for all countries to move towards a percentage of 10% for the marine environment. And it's just not 10% of areas in the ocean, but really areas that will in fact conserve biodiversity and provide livelihoods for neighboring communities. That is a huge step, going from 2% to 10% by 2020. So that is a significant challenge in front of us. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Congress focused on solutions, and many of the governments actually stepped up in terms of protecting the ocean at the Congress itself. For example, Gabon was one country that was highlighted, made a commitment to protect over 45,000 square kilometers of marine coastline, cutting off from commercial fisheries. South Africa, again, stepped up. They're developing 22 new marine protected areas. China also made a commitment to get to 10% get to 5% by 2020. So again, there's some significant movement in this area. How many people in the crowd work or live in a World Heritage Site. So many of you will be interested in this particular report that was tabled. It's basically an overall global assessment of how well we're doing in managing the best of the best, the World Heritage Sites that we have. And over 500 experts from around the world. It took 3 years to carry out the various assessments. And I just want to point out that if you look at the map, and it doesn't show up too well here because of the size, there are some areas that continue to be significant concern, and some areas that are actually of requiring critical attention. And many of those in the audience here, you're facing those every day. The advantage of tabling a report like this, it does raise the awareness of both the good and the bad that's happening in our World Heritage Sites, but it also provides the scorecard for governments to measure themselves and identify the need to make some improvements in its management. So hopefully this particular report will continue to move these governments forward. A new program that was tabled at the Congress was called the Green List. And again, it focused on sort of the positive, developing a global standard on protected areas that are well managed, engages indigenous communities as well as the local community in its management, successful in biodiversity conservation. Once you meet all those standards, you're put on to the Green List. And this particular program just started in 2014. It's starting to pick up some momentum, and I'm sure many of you will have some examples of to contribute to that particular Green List into the future. Right now, I'm going to turn to the people segment of the Inspiring Solutions. One of the key documents that was produced for tabling at the Congress was this document called Protected Areas Governance and Management. It's a bit of a beast. It's over 1,000 pages. I believe it had 28 authors, and it's basically the compendium of how we manage parks around the world. But perhaps even more important about this document is the fact that it puts case studies where each one of us can recognize the work that we do and how we can go about perhaps applying new approaches and using other approaches to meet some of the challenges. And as well, this is one area where we are trying to professionalize our network by providing this information. And you can go, if nothing else from my presentation, just take down the title of this particular volume, because I think it's going to be invaluable to you and to your colleagues. You can Google it, and it'll pop up in two forms. You can buy it from Amazon, or you can go to the university in Australia where this was produced, and you can download it for free. I suggest the latter. So. And as well, just want to highlight some of the capacity development programs that have recently been advanced and continue to move forward. We have 8-week on-site courses that were developed in West Africa. We have master's degrees, as well as, first time I heard this term, a MOOC. Does anyone else know what a MOOC is? Okay. I just found out in Sydney, Australia. So it's a massive module online course. This is clearly one method for our community to disseminate online courses globally and then use the technology to our advantage. And we can reach many, many more students this way compared to the more traditional way. I was asked to provide a bit of some free publicity for Mike Appleton and Jim Barbaric, who will be holding workshops and capacity development during the course of this week. So look in the agenda, and then you'll get much more information on what capacity development is all about. I'll be the first to admit that governance, when it was first brought forward in the protected areas discussions, I had no idea what governance is. And maybe I still don't have it that clearly in my mind, but it's really basically how does one go about sharing power and resources in a decision-making process. That's probably the simplest way to go about it. And it's actually quite significant in terms of how decisions are made in my parks and in your parks. And if you don't have a good governance structure and you don't understand who's making the decisions, then there's bound to be conflict. And as well, if you don't know within your governance structure who you need to include in that decision-making process, again, you're bound to run into significant barriers. So again, a fairly large document that was produced at the Congress. The Congress recognized the fact that Indigenous people have been managing the land for thousands of years. And in the recent decade, we've also identified how traditional knowledge, their traditional way of life can actually help us in our everyday work in terms of, many of you are fully aware of how traditional knowledge contribute to fire management in our various parks, how to identify wildlife corridors. At the Congress itself, it really highlighted this as an area that we need to work much more closely with the Indigenous people's community and incorporate that knowledge and culture into our work. I mentioned earlier, under the leadership of Parks Victoria, health again has become a very significant issue, and how protected areas, the parks that we run, national, regional, or municipal, can actually contribute to the health agenda. And as we see in North America and China and other countries, we're seeing obesity and the lack of exercise, the fear of going outdoors as a significant issue. And this is where protected areas will and can become an actual solution. Touched on this on Nelson Mandela's challenge to us. There was also a significant discussion and stream on how do we go about inspiring the new generation so they can become the leaders of tomorrow and take over some of the challenges that we're facing. And this also links to the presentation that Sheldon gave earlier yesterday. How do we connect the disconnected to our parks? And again, many agencies, protected area agencies around the world, including Parks Canada and the U.S. Park Service, have taken this as a priority to move forward on connecting people to our parks.